In the quiet city of Nizhny Novgorod, Russia, a man lived a life that many believed to be ordinary. But hidden behind the walls of his cluttered apartment was a secret so dark, so disturbing, it shocked the entire world. Today, we're diving deep into the real-life nightmare of Anatoly Moskvin, a man whose obsession with death and the dead turned into something far more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. Anatoly Moskvin was no ordinary man. He was a brilliant academic, an expert in Celtic history, a linguist fluent in over a dozen languages. But Moskvin had a passion that went beyond the intellectual. He was obsessed with the dead. For over a decade, he made it his mission to document cemeteries across Russia, visiting over 700 burial sites, and becoming known as a necropolist. But this wasn't just a harmless hobby. Moskvin's fascination with the dead began when he was a child. He recounted a terrifying experience when, at 12 years old, he was forced by an adult to kiss the face of a young girl who had died. That traumatic moment, Moskvin said, was the beginning of his lifelong connection with the deceased. Moskvin claimed that he heard voices of dead, children calling to him from their graves, begging to be freed. And so, in 2009, he began what can only be described as a nightmarish mission. Under the cover of darkness, Moskvin dug up the graves of girls between the ages of 3 and 15. What he did next defies all comprehension. Moskvin didn't simply remove the bodies. He carefully preserved them, using methods he had researched from ancient Egyptian mummification. He stuffed their hollowed bodies with rags, coated them with wax, and dressed them in children's clothes. But perhaps the most chilling detail was the way Moskvin transformed these bodies into what he called dolls. He painted their faces, applied makeup, and even inserted music boxes into their rib cages so they could sing when touched. For years, Moskvin lived with these dolls in his apartment, talking to them, caring for them as if they were his own children. He even celebrated their birthdays, holding parties and making tea for them, to his neighbors and even his parents, who sometimes visited his home. These figures seemed like strange, but harmless creations. Little did they know, each doll was once a living, breathing child. For Moskvin, these girls were not dead. He believed he was preserving them until science could one day revive them. He saw himself as their savior, giving them new life in his twisted dollhouse. His delusions went so far that he even gave each girl a name and detailed biography, writing letters and imagining conversations with them. In November 2011, everything unraveled. After a series of grave desecrations were reported, Russian authorities began investigating Moskvin. What they found inside his apartment was beyond anyone's worst nightmares. 29 mummified corpses of girls, all carefully posed and dressed. Some had been in his possession for nearly a decade. Moskvin was immediately arrested, but what he told investigators was perhaps even more disturbing. He saw nothing wrong with his actions. He explained that he wanted to save the girls from their eternal loneliness, that he had simply rescued them from their graves. For Moskvin, this was not an act of violence or desecration. It was love. The trial, if you could call it that, ended with Moskvin being declared unfit to stand trial. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia and sentenced to a psychiatric institution, where he remains to this day. His story, however, continues to haunt the families of the young girls he took, and the city of Nizhny Novgorod itself. Anatoly Moskvin's obsession with the dead was not just a psychological horror. It was a real-life nightmare, a reminder that sometimes the monsters we fear most are not the ones hiding in the dark, but the ones walking among us.